Android Soo, Parallel Blue, written and illustrated by Diana. Chapter 9. Kay waited in his apartment until 2 a.m. At that time of the morning, everyone at the Cran complex should be asleep. He decided to return alone because there would be less chance of discovery. He could locate Soo, assess the situation, then beam back to Enviro Repair to get help. Earlier, he talked with Sten to let her know his plan. She agreed to do nothing until he returned with news of Soo. When Kay beamed into the Cran receiver near the horse barn, all was quiet and dark. He needed to get inside the main house to look for Soo, because that was where Tink saw her. She probably spent her recharge time inside the house. That would make her easier to locate. It was only a short distance to the main house, which was also dark, except for a dim light coming from a small basement window. Kay went to the window to see if anyone was inside, but the glass was frosted. Near the window was an old pipe that was blocked with only a wad of cloth stuffed inside. Kay pulled out the cloth and saw that the pipe was wide enough for him to squeeze through into the basement. The pipe ended about 8 feet into the basement and 6 feet above the floor. There was only a dim light coming from an adjacent room, but Kay could see well enough to know that if he jumped from that height to the hard floor below, he might injure himself. Instead, he pulled himself out and stood on top of the pipe. He looked up and saw a cable within reach running along the ceiling and down one wall. He managed to grip the cable, which hung loosely from several staples along its length, and move hand over hand to the wall where he climbed down to the floor. Kay walked to a doorway and peeked around the edge of the doorframe into a dimly lit small room. The room was bare except for a small oblong black box on the floor. Kay knew this was an Android recharge box, but could not believe his luck at finding Soo in the first place he looked. He had to make sure Soo was inside, and not some other android, but he knew the recharge light would go off as soon as the box was opened, and the android inside would wake up. If Soo was inside, and she didn't recognize him, or even remember who she really was, she might give the alarm herself, which would get him caught. But he had to make sure, so as quickly as he could, he opened and closed the box. It was Soo's box, all right. She was inside in recharge mode, and Kay stood by waiting to see if the short interruption in the light's energy beam would wake her up. After a few minutes, there seemed to be no activity from the box. Perhaps, Kay thought, he was quick enough that Soo didn't wake up from recharge mode. The best course of action would be to take Soo out of the building inside the box while she was still in recharge mode, but he knew he couldn't do it by himself. There were still a few hours left before the household would begin the day's activities. He had to go to Enviro Repair for help. While searching through other parts of the basement for an easier way out, Kay found an old transporter that looked as if it hadn't been used in years. It was only 4 feet tall and very wide, like it was made for transporting cargo. Kay, knowing a bit about how transporters worked, managed to verify that this transporter was in working order. He found the notify switch and disconnected it. Now he and the others could beam back directly into the basement undetected. Kay stepped into the transporter, entered the proper coordinates, and beamed to the Enviro Repair office. He walked down the hall to Sten's living quarters. She opened the door as soon as Kay knocked. She had been watching old movies on a digawindow inside her apartment while waiting for Kay. Sten had a large collection of 2D movies made hundreds of years ago. Copies of these movies were rare and hard to find. More modern 3-dimensional and immersion movies were what most people wanted. Before Sten switched off the movie, Kay saw a woman dressed in very tight and uncomfortable-looking clothes throw a glass full of liquid into a man's face. But Kay thought something must have been wrong with the digawindow, because the color setting didn't seem to be working. Everything in the movie was in shades of gray. "Well?" asked Sten anxiously. "Did you find Soo? Is she all right?" Kay explained to Sten what he found at the Cran complex. And there's an old cargo transporter right in the basement we can all beam into. We should get some of the other androids and beam back to the Cran complex to rescue Soo now before it gets light, suggested Sten. She contacted Lycone, Tish, Tink, Lilu through her intercom system. They all quickly met in the office and crowded into the Enviro Repair transporter. Kay warned Sten that the receiver they were beaming into was only 4 feet tall, so she got down on her hands and knees, and Tink hit the send button. When they arrived in the small receiver in the basement of the Cran mansion, all was still quiet and dark, except for the light coming from the room where Soo was asleep in her recharge box. It was nearly 4 a.m., and they would have to be quick if they wanted to get out of there before daybreak. Kay led the way. There were 2 doorways on opposite sides of the lighted room. Sten asked Tink to act as lookout at one door and Lilu at the other. The box had to be disconnected from its power supply so Sten could pick it up and take it back to Enviro Repair. There was a latch on the outside of the box, which Kay fastened before Sten terminated the power supply. She interrupted the beam going from the box to a power outlet in the wall by sliding a piece of discarded metal she picked up from the floor through the beam. The beam disappeared. Kay knew Soo would wake up soon, and he wanted to keep her inside the box until they got back to Enviro Repair. "Someone is," said Lee. "Coming," said Lou. Now they could all hear the footsteps of someone approaching. Sten grabbed the recharge box and they all hid behind the door as the huge bulk of Mir entered the room looking around for the recharge box. Soo's friend began to struggle inside the box trying to get out and drew the attention of Mir to where Sten and the androids were hidden. As Mir pulled back the door, Tink, Tish, and Lycone squeezed into a small hole knocked into the wall behind the door. "Who are you? What are you doing with that box?" Mir yelled at Sten while reaching for the box. Sten twisted out of Mir's way, clutching the recharge box close to her body, and dashed out of the room toward the transporter. Mir reached down to scoop up Lilu as they tried to slip through the doorway. She put the struggling duo into a large pocket of her jumpsuit, buttoning it shut. Mir simultaneously blocked Kay's escape with her other arm and picked him up, wrapping her huge hand around his entire body and pinning his arms to his sides. She pushed a button on her wristband, and immediately there were 6 guards with stun guns surrounding Sten. Mir handed Kay to one of the guards for safekeeping. "I'll take that," said Bry, who walked up to Sten from behind the guards and grabbed Soo's recharge box. Soo's friend was still struggling to get out of the box. Bry set the box on the floor and undid the latch. Soo's friend pushed open the top and sat up inside the box. "Is there a problem?" asked Soo, looking up at all the people who surrounded her. "This person was attempting to steal you," said Bry, indicating Sten. "I am not trying to steal this android," said Sten. "She is Soo, an employee of mine." "I think you are mistaken." Bry looked down at Soo's friend standing next to him on the floor. "Tell them who you are and what you're doing here." "I am Fren. I was created for the Cran family to repair their environmental systems," said Soo's friend in a monotone voice. "Are you happy here? Are you being mistreated?" asked Bry, knowing exactly what the answer would be. Soo didn't answer immediately, and the smug smile slowly faded from Bry's face. Soo was staring up at Kay as the guard who was holding him set him on the floor. Kay walked forward to stand in front of Soo. "Do you know me, Soo?" "I know you." Soo put a hand up to her forehead, trying to clear the fog from her memory. Then in a soft voice she said, "My name is Soo." Kay rushed forward to close the small space between them and put his arms around Soo. "Yes, you're Soo." Then in a stronger voice Soo said, "I am not happy here." Mir said, "There is obviously something wrong with this android. She should be taken back to Zoprat for a diagnostic exam." Mir began to move towards Soo with the intention of returning her to the recharge box. "And I'll take this woman and these other androids back to Zoprat as well. Maybe there she will confess to her thievery." In one quick motion, Mir grabbed Soo, pinning her arms to her sides, shoved her into the box, and latched the lid. Sten and the others had no choice but to go with Mir and Bry. The guards followed behind. "We have to do something," whispered Tish. She, Lycone, and Tink were watching everything that happened, hidden behind a bucket in a corner of the room. "Like what?" demanded Lycone in frustration. "There are only 3 of us and 10 of them, and they're all 3 times larger." "There might be something we can do." Tish and Lycone looked down at Tink as it spoke. "That pipe over there has been leaking water onto the floor, and there's quite a big puddle." Tink pointed to a large puddle of water the guards and the others would have to walk through if they were going to go back the way they came. "If we wait until as many people as possible are standing in that water, I can charge it with electricity. That will stun all the humans, but won't hurt the androids. Sten'll be stunned, but I can make sure the current isn't high enough to cause any serious injury." The group of people started walking toward an elevator on the other side of the puddle. Tink moved along the wall unseen toward an edge of the puddle. As Tink reached the edge of the puddle, Mir and Bry stepped into the water, followed by Sten and the guards. As luck would have it, they were all bunched closely together in the puddle in front of the elevator, waiting for it to descend. Tink leaned down and put his arm into the water. A bolt of electricity generated from the center of Tink's body traveled down its arm and into the water. Immediately, the humans began jerking spasmodically and fell to the ground, splashing water everywhere. When Tink pulled its hand out of the water, only Mir was left standing, staring down at Tink. "Rubber-soled shoes," she said, splashing the water with her feet. "Better traction than that synthetic crap, and rubber doesn't conduct electricity." She pulled a bag out of one of her many pockets and put it over Tink, and picked him up in the bag, being careful not to touch Tink inside, in case it had any other shocking ideas. Tish and Lycone shrank back farther behind the bucket, watching helplessly. Slowly, Sten, Bry, and the guards recovered from their shock. They all stood up, dripping water from their clothes. "What happened?" asked Bry, trying to squeeze the excess water out of his shirt. "This little android," Mir held up the bag with Tink inside, "tried to electrocute us." "Gimme that!" Bry snatched the bag out of Mir's grasp. Bry cautiously opened the bag and looked inside. "Ooh, an LR1. I've heard about these, but I've never seen one." Bry was already thinking about how he could best market this android to get the most credits, a form of digital money, not even considering that he did not own it. Bry and Mir led the way into the elevator. They couldn't all fit inside the small space, and most of the guards had to stay in the basement and wait for the elevator to return. The elevator stopped at the main level of the house. The doors of the elevator slid open directly across from a transporter. There was a big commotion around the transporter between some of the household staff and 3 police officers who had just beamed into the house. "What's the meaning of this?" Mir asked the police. The officer, who seemed to be in charge, stepped forward. "We got a call about an android theft." "Yes, officer. She tried to steal one of the Crand household androids," said Bry, stepping forward and pointing to Sten. Mir held up the black box with Soo inside. "Our report was kind of the other way around," said the officer. "More like you are the one doing the stealing." "That's absurd!" shouted Bry. "Who called you?" The elevator doors opened again. The rest of the guards stepped out, along with Lycone and Tish, who rode up unnoticed by the guards. "That would be me," said Tish. "I called the police to report your theft." She pointed at Bry. I think we better all go down to the station and straighten this out, said the officer in charge. After a couple of hours at the police station, where many questions were asked and answered, Sten, Sue, and the rest of the androids were allowed to leave. Bry and Mir were being questioned in a different part of the station. "Thank you for your cooperation," said the officer in charge. "From the information we gathered here, it seems obvious Bry and Zoprat are up to some shady dealings with these little androids." The officer pointed up the hall toward a transporter. "This transporter can beam you to wherever you want to go." The officer turned and walked the other way down the hall. As they all walked to the transporter, Sten told Sue she thought she should go back to Enviro Repair and her own apartment. Being in your own space should help you break through the rest of the false memory layer. "I don't know what to do," said Sue helplessly, still shaken by her ordeal. "Come with me to my apartment," said Kay hopefully. "We don't know what kind of effects there may be from everything you've been through, and I can keep an eye on you there. Maybe tomorrow you can go back to your apartment if you're feeling better." "You're right," said Sten to Kay. Then she turned to Sue. "There may be effects, and I can't be in your apartment to take care of you." "All right, I'll go with Kay," said Sue.